Volume 3, Chapter 4 of The Last Man. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Nicodemus. Volume 3, Chapter 4 of The Last Man by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Our escort had been directed to prepare our abode for the night at the inn, opposite the ascent to the castle. We could not again visit the halls and familiar chambers of our home on a mere visit. We had already left for ever the glades of Windsor, and all of coppice, flowery hedgerow, and murmuring stream, which gave shape and intensity to the love of our country, and the almost superstitious attachment with which we regarded native England. It had been our intention to have called at Lucy's dwelling in Datchet, and to have reassured her with promises of aid and protection before we repaired to our quarters for the night. Now, as the Countess of Windsor and I turned down the steep hill that led from the castle, we saw the children, who had just stopped in their caravan at the inn door. They had passed through Datchet without halting. I dreaded to meet them and to be the bearer of my tragic story, so while they were still occupied in the hurry of arrival, I suddenly left them, and through the snow and clear moonlight air, hastened along the well-known road to Datchet. Well-known indeed it was. Each cottage stood on its accustomed site. Each tree wore its familiar appearance. Habit had graven unerasably on my memory every turn and change of object on the road. At a short distance beyond the little park was an elm half blown down by a storm, some 10 years ago, and still with leafless snow-laden branches it stretched across the pathway, which wound through a meadow beside a shallow brook, whose brawling was silenced by frost. That stile, that white gate, that hollow oak tree, which doubtless once belonged to the forest, and which now showed in the moonlight its gaping rent, to whose fanciful appearance, tricked out by the dusk into a resemblance of the human form, the children had given the name of Falstaff. All these objects were as well known to me as the cold hearth of my deserted home, and every moss-grown wall and plot of orchard ground, alike as twin lambs are to each other in a stranger's eye, yet to my accustomed gaze bore differences, distinction, and a name. England remained, though England was dead. It was the ghost of merry England that I beheld. Under those greenwood shade, passing generations had sported in security and ease. To this painful recognition of familiar places was added a feeling experienced by all, understood by none, a feeling as if in some state less visionary than a dream, and some past real existence, I had seen all I saw with precisely the same feelings as I now beheld them, as if all my sensations were a duplex mirror of a former revelation. To get rid of this oppressive sense, I strove to imagine change in this tranquil spot. This augmented my mood by causing me to bestow more attention on the objects which occasioned me pain. I reached Datchet and Lucy's humble abode, once noisy with Saturday night revellers, or trim and neat on Sunday morning. It had borne testimony to the labours and orderly habits of the housewife. The snow lay high about the door, as if it had remained unclosed for many days. What scene of death hath Roscius now to act? I muttered to myself as I looked at the dark casements. At first I thought I saw a light in one of them, but it proved to be merely the refraction of the moonbeams, while the only sound was the crackling branches as the breeze whirred the snowflakes from them. The moon sailed high and unclouded in the interminable ether, while the shadow of the cottage lay back on the garden behind. I entered this by the open wicket, and anxiously examined each window. At length I detected a ray of light struggling through a closed shutter in one of the upper rooms. It was a novel feeling, alas, to look at any house and say there dwells its usual inmate. The door of the house was merely on the latch, so I entered and descended the moonlit staircase. The door of the inhabited room was ajar. Looking in, I saw Lucy, sitting as at work at the table on which the light stood. The implements of needlework were about her, but her hand had fallen on her lap, and her eyes, fixed on the ground, showed by their vacancy that her thoughts wandered. Traces of care and watching had diminished her former attractions, but her simple dress and cap, her desponding attitude, and the single candle that cast its light upon her, gave for a moment a picturesque grouping to the whole. A fearful reality recalled me from the thought. A figure lay stretched on the bed, covered by a sheet. Her mother was dead, and Lucy, apart from all the world, deserted and alone, watched beside the corpse during the weary night. I entered the room, and my unexpected appearance at first drew a scream from the lone survivor of a dead nation. But she recognized me, and recovered herself, with the quick exercise of self-control habitual to her. "Did you not expect me?" I asked in that low voice which the presence of the dead makes us as it were instinctively assume. "You are very good," replied she, "to have come yourself. I can never thank you sufficiently, but it is too late." "Too late!" cried I. "What do you mean?" "It is not too late to take you from this deserted place, and conduct you to—" My own loss, which I had forgotten as I spoke, now made me turn away, while choking grief impeded my speech. I threw open the window, and looked on the cold, waning, ghastly, misshaped circle on high, and the chill white earth beneath. Did the spirit of sweet Idris sail along the moon-frozen crystal air? No, no, a more genial atmosphere, a lovelier habitation, was surely hers. I indulged in this meditation for a moment, and then again addressed the mourner, who stood leaning against the bed with the expression of resigned despair, of complete misery, and a patient sufferance of it, which is far more touching than any of the insane ravings or wild gesticulation of untamed sorrow. I desired to draw her from this spot, but she opposed my wish. That class of persons whose imagination and sensibility have never been taken out of the narrow circle immediately in view, if they possess these qualities to any extent, are apt to pour their influence into the very realities which appear to destroy them, and to cling to these with double tenacity, from not being able to comprehend anything beyond. Thus Lucy, in desert England, in a dead world, wished to fulfill the usual ceremonies of the dead, such as were customary to the English country people, when death was a rare visitant, and gave us time to receive his dreaded usurpation with pomp and circumstance, going forth in procession to deliver the keys of the tomb into his conquering hand. She had already, alone as she was, accomplished some of these, and the work on which I found her employed was her mother's shroud. My heart sickened at such detail of woe, which a female can endure, but which is more painful to the masculine spirit than deadliest struggle, or throes of unutterable but transient agony. This must not be, I told her, and then, as further inducement, I communicated to her my recent loss, and gave her the idea that she must come with me to take charge of the orphan children, whom the death of Idris had deprived of a mother's care. Lucy never resisted the call of a duty, so she yielded, and closing the casements and doors with care, she accompanied me back to Windsor. As we went, she communicated to me the occasion of her mother's death. Either by some mischance she had got sight of Lucy's letter to Idris, or she had overheard her conversation with the countryman who bore it. However it might be, she obtained a knowledge of the appalling situation of herself and her daughter. Her aged frame could not sustain the anxiety and horror this discovery instilled. She concealed her knowledge from Lucy, but brooded over it through sleepless nights, till fever and delirium, swift forerunners of death, disclosed the secret. Her life, which had long been hovering on its extinction, now yielded at once to the united effects of misery and sickness, and that same morning she had died. After the tumultuous emotions of the day, I was glad to find on my arrival at the inn that my companions had retired to rest. I gave Lucy in charge to the Countess's attendant, and then sought repose from my various struggles and impatient regrets. For a few moments the events of the day floated in disastrous pageant through my brain, till sleep bathed it in forgetfulness. When morning dawned and I awoke, it seemed as if my slumber had endured for years. My companions had not shared my oblivion. Clara's swollen eyes showed that she has passed the night in weeping. The Countess looked haggard and wan. Her firm spirit had not found relief in tears, and she suffered the more from all the painful retrospect and agonizing regret that now occupied her. We departed from Windsor as soon as the burial rites had been performed for Lucy.